When my son Daniel was born, I thought I had been handed the greatest blessing of my life. I still remember the sleepless nights when I would rock him in my arms, humming lullabies while his little fingers curled tightly around mine. I raised him alone after his father passed away when Daniel was just 12. Every dream, every ounce of strength I had left in me, I poured into him. I worked double shifts, sacrificed vacations, sold family jewelry, and did everything in my power so my son would never feel he lacked anything. And Daniel did not disappoint me. He grew into a brilliant, determined man who built his own empire from the ground up. With a sharp mind for business and a heart that still carried my values, he created a company worth millions. By the time he was 40, Daniel was worth over $70 million. But to me, he was not my wealthy son. He was still my little boy who used to fall asleep on my lap after playing in the backyard. Then came Emily, his wife, my daughter-in-law. At first, she seemed like a blessing too. She was beautiful, charming, and knew how to smile at the right times. I welcomed her warmly into the family, thinking Daniel had found a partner who would cherish him as much as I did. I opened my heart to her, treating her like my own daughter. But over time, cracks began to appear. Her laughter became sharper, her kindness more forced, and her eyes colder whenever she looked at me. Still, for Daniel's sake, I endured. I convinced myself that perhaps I was being overly protective. After all, he was happy, or at least he thought he was. And as a mother, I wanted nothing more than to see my son live a fulfilled life. But fate is cruel. Daniel's sudden death tore my world apart. A car accident, they said. One moment I had a son, a reason to keep living, and the next, I was staring at a coffin lowered into the ground. I could hardly breathe through the grief. My hands trembled as I touched the wooden surface of his casket, whispering, "I'll see you soon, my boy. I'll take care of everything, I promise." The house felt empty without him, and for weeks I wandered through each room as though expecting him to appear at the door, smiling, saying, "Mother, I'm home." But the silence was deafening. Then came the day of the will reading. My heart was heavy, but I believed at least this moment would remind us of Daniel's love. He had worked so hard, and I was certain he would have left something for me. Not the money itself, but a token of remembrance, a gesture that would say, "Mother, I never forgot you." I entered the lawyer's office with trembling hands. Emily was already seated, draped in a designer dress, her lips painted blood red as if she were attending a gala, not her husband's final proceedings. Her eyes flicked over me with disdain, and she barely offered a greeting. The lawyer, Mr. Harris, began reading aloud the clauses of Daniel's will. My son had indeed left behind an enormous estate. Properties, investments, businesses, worth nearly $70 million. My heart swelled with bittersweet pride. All those years of sacrifice, all the times I had whispered prayers over his sleeping form, it had all borne fruit. But then Emily's voice cut through the room like a knife. "You won't get anything from your son's $70 million!" she shouted suddenly, turning to face me with venom in her eyes. "Don't think for a second that you'll benefit from Daniel's hard work. This is mine now, all of it!" The words struck me harder than any physical blow could. I sat frozen, staring at her, unable to believe that the woman I had once embraced as a daughter could say something so cruel. My lips quivered, but no sound came out. It wasn't about the money. It never was. I had lived my whole life working, surviving, scraping by. I didn't need riches to find peace. But to hear her dismiss me so mercilessly, to erase my role in my son's life as though I were nothing, it shattered me. I could see the lawyer shifting uncomfortably, his gaze flicking between us. But Emily only smirked, crossing her legs confidently, as though she had already claimed her throne. In that moment, my grief twisted into something darker. The sorrow in my chest was no longer just about losing Daniel. It was about betrayal. A betrayal that cut deeper than death itself. I left the office that day with tears streaming down my face, my body frail. But somewhere inside me, a spark of determination began to burn. Emily thought I was powerless. She thought she had crushed me, but she had no idea, because I knew something she didn't. And that knowledge would one day become her downfall. The days after the will reading were some of the loneliest of my life. I would sit by the window every morning, clutching Daniel's old coffee mug, waiting for a son who would never return. His laughter still echoed in my ears. His footsteps still seemed to move through the halls of the house. I thought grief would be the heaviest burden I would ever carry. But I was wrong. Betrayal was heavier. Emily's words haunted me. "You won't get anything from your son's 70 million. She had spatted at me like venom, not just stripping me of material possessions, but of dignity, of the bond I had with my only child. At first, I tried to ignore her. I told myself she was grieving in her own way, perhaps lashing out because of the pain. But it quickly became clear that grief had no place in her heart. Only greed did. Within weeks of Daniel's funeral, Emily began making changes. She sold one of his beloved vintage cars, a vehicle he had spent years restoring with his own hands. She threw out boxes of his old books and even cleared his office, painting the walls a bright, sterile white. "Too many memories," she said coldly when I confronted her. "This house needs a fresh start." But it wasn't a fresh start. It was an erasure. She wanted to wipe away every trace of Daniel, as if he were just a stepping stone on her climb to luxury. The more I watched, the more unsettled I became. Lavish parties filled the house that used to echo with family dinners and laughter. Strangers in expensive suits and glittering dresses filled Daniel's living room, sipping champagne and talking about business deals I couldn't understand. Emily stood in the center of it all, radiant in jewels and designer gowns, smiling as though she had won some prize. It broke my heart. My son's blood, sweat, and sleepless nights had built that empire, and here she was squandering it as though it were a lottery ticket. But then, one evening, I found something that planted the first seed of suspicion. I was walking past Daniel's old study, now stripped bare and repainted, when I noticed a drawer that Emily had overlooked. It was part of his old desk, which she had shoved into the garage, intending to sell at auction. I opened it and found a bundle of envelopes tied with a faded ribbon. They were letters, handwritten by Daniel. My hands trembled as I unfolded one of them. His familiar handwriting brought tears to my eyes. He had written to me, though he had never sent these letters. They were filled with love, gratitude, and little notes about his plans for the future. But one line in particular stood out: "Mother, don't worry. I've made sure you will always be taken care of, no matter what happens. I've arranged everything with Mr. Harris, but keep this between us. Emily doesn't need to know." My breath caught in my throat. Arranged everything. With Mr. Harris, the lawyer. Did this mean there was more to the will than Emily wanted me to believe? I clutched the letters to my chest, my heart racing. If Daniel had made special arrangements for me, then why had Mr. Harris read only one version of the will? Could Emily have hidden something? Or perhaps pressured the lawyer into silence? The next day, I visited Mr. Harris under the pretense of asking a few questions. He seemed nervous as soon as I mentioned Daniel's arrangements. His eyes darted away, his voice faltered, and he quickly changed the subject. That only confirmed my suspicions. Something was being kept from me. As days turned into weeks, I began to notice other signs. A slip of paper Emily dropped while rushing to a meeting revealed a bank account I didn't recognize. A conversation I overheard between her and one of her friends hinted at her desire to liquidate assets quickly before anyone starts asking questions. And then, the biggest clue of all, one of Daniel's old business partners, Mr. Lewis, approached me at a cafe. His expression was somber as he said quietly, "Your son trusted you, Mrs. Carter. He told me once that if anything happened to him, his mother would be the guardian of his true legacy. Emily doesn't know everything. Don't let her destroy what he built." Those words struck me like a lightning bolt. My son had trusted me. He had planned for me to protect his legacy. And Emily, drunk on arrogance and greed, was trying to erase me from the picture. That night, I sat by Daniel's photo, tears rolling down my cheeks, but there was steel in my spine for the first time since his death. "Don't worry, my boy," I whispered to his smiling face. "She thinks she's clever, but your mother is still here, and I will not let her win." The grief inside me was slowly transforming into something else. Something sharper. Something stronger. It was no longer just about mourning my son. It was about protecting his memory. It was about justice. And for that, I would need a plan. For weeks, I kept my head low and pretended to be weak. Emily strutted around the mansion like a queen, convinced she had broken me. Whenever she barked at me or flaunted her expensive purchases, I lowered my gaze, as if defeated. She thought I was harmless, an old woman too fragile to stand in her way. That illusion became my greatest weapon. But behind closed doors, I began weaving a plan. Every evening, I read Daniel's hidden letters again and again, memorizing every detail, every hint he left for me. He had mentioned Mr. Harris, the lawyer by name. That meant there had to be more, something deliberately concealed. One afternoon, I returned to Mr. Harris's office. This time, I didn't play the grieving mother. I looked him straight in the eye and said firmly, "Daniel told me he made special arrangements for me. If you're hiding something, remember this. He trusted you to honor his wishes, not hers." The man swallowed hard, sweat forming on his forehead. After a long silence, he finally spoke in a hushed voice. "There is another document," he admitted. "An addendum Daniel made to